Alright, so the next video in our Civil 3D series on basic bridge design is going to cover creating sample lines and section views. In previous videos we have established our horizontal alignment. We have created a roadway profile, both the existing ground profile and our finished ground profile. We have created a corridor based on our assemblies, which we stuck down here, our typical section assemblies, and we have created a corridor. And now I've gone in since the last video and updated the corridor so it reflects all of the widening for the guardrail, different sections throughout. So we have multiple regions, multiple targets, and for basic purposes our corridor is created. We'll have to tinker with it as we go for different things like driveways, and as we get into our roadside ditches and any special ditches that need to happen. But for the most part, it's generally set. And the important thing that we did in the last video relative to this one is we created a top and a datum surface for our corridor. Now, as our corridor can automatically be rebuilt, if we selected it here, we can see that we checked automatically rebuild. So our surfaces that reflect that corridor will automatically be rebuilt every time we make the changes. And so that's really helpful. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create our section views. So these are our cross sections for our roadway, and this will aid us in both the design, but as far as it's also a required part of our plan sheets, design sheets. So the first thing we need to do is determine or tell AutoCAD where we want cross sections. Typically we're going to want them at all plus 0, or plus 50, so every 50 feet along the roadway center line, but also generally at the start and end of our actual construction project, and for features like our bridge, the center line of the bridge, any driveways, any cross drains, things like that. But for right now we're going to focus purely on our roadway sections. So the first thing we need to do is create sample lines. So these are the lines that will determine our section views. So again, we're on the Home tab, and we've been pretty much in here in the Design, Create Design section. But now we're going to move over here to Profile and Section Views. So we want to click Sample Lines. First thing it does is ask for an alignment. And so we're going to go and we're going to select our alignment here. And so from there, two dialog boxes pop up. We have one kind of toolbar and then a dialog box to create a sample line group. So we're going to work through that. So we can name our sample line group, and sometimes it's good if you have multiple groups that you're going to create to go ahead and name this. So we can just call this roadway center line. Okay, and we have our sample line different styles. We want road sample line, and again, some of these, when we get into the styles, some of these may be very specific to our company and our set styles, so you may not see these pop up, but again, just things to note as you're going through this process, setting the label styles and things like that. So we want a road sample line, and we want section stations to be labeled on there. And we do actually want to set the layer for these because they're nice to see as we're designing, but we really don't want to see them on our plan sheets. So we're going to scroll down and set them. So a lot of these are pre-built in here, but we want C road samp for our sample lines. Okay. And now we need to think about what data sources we want to sample. So think when we have a cross section. What information do we want on it? So we definitely want the existing ground surface. Now it's got it in here twice because we have the shortcut and the existing ground. So we'll just click off the bottom one there. We don't need the whole corridor, but we just need the top and the datum. So those are our three sources. Now we can set a style for each of these. So the EG, we want that to be existing ground. Our top, we want to be finished ground. And then we can leave the datum as just standard. And so again, the datum, this is going to be the bottom of all of your pavement or aggregate things that we established in our typical section or our assembly. And that line provides us with our, essentially that's our cut or fill line. That's the bottom as far as earthwork is concerned. Anything above that is considered extra material, so aggregate, asphalt or concrete or gravel, things like that. So we need that, and we need the top surface to be the full finished ground, and then all that is being compared to the existing ground. So now we can hit OK. Now it's asking us, we've told the information that we want it to sample and how to set that up, but now it's asking us to specify stations along the baseline where we want to sample. So we could manually go in and click one at a time, but if we come into our sample line tools, right here there's a drop down, and we can do multiple things. We can do corridor stations, existing polylines, or add a single station. We want by a range of stations. And so now it asks, well, what is your range of stations? And so we can set that we want from the alignment start to the alignment end. And we'll talk about that in a second. We want our width to be 70 feet. This may not hold for everybody, and probably in like an urban setting, or if you're doing a small road with residential with just curb and gutters, you may not want to go 70 feet. But that gives us plenty of room to see any cut and fill, anything like that. So we want 50-foot increments, and that's relative to the absolute station, so not setting it relative to a station that we set. And then we can say, do we want it at the range start or range end? For right now, we're just going to leave this as is. But something to keep in mind, and we'll note on this drawing, we don't necessarily start our construction project at the 10 plus a pair and end at 18 plus 50. Our construction, based on our profile, goes a little bit sooner than that. We can add these in later, or we can, if we would have written these down, we could have come in and set what those were in here, and then we could change the range start and end to true. But for right now, we're just going to show the general method. So we're going to hit OK, and then we're going to just right click and finish that. So now we have every 50 feet we have sample lines. Now you'll note again, because we left at range start and range end false, we're not sampling at the very end, but even here the end would be 1850 and the beginning would be 10 plus pair. So we can go back and set that, or we can set it to be this line. Okay, but that's the general process. So let's actually go in, we'll note these actual stations. And so we'll come over here, so we have 10 plus 43, 26, and this one's 18, 27, 10. So what I'm actually going to do is back up a bit. just hitting Control Z to undo. So now we have undone. So one thing to note just when you're undoing, every time you zoom in or pan around, that counts as a command. So when you're cycling through your undo command, it has to go through all those first. And if you do enough that you wonder, did I go far enough? One thing you can always check, you can hit F2 and it pops up all the most recent commands. And so you'll see it's undoing, the zooming, the panning, the zooming, panning. But now we have undone our create sample lines group. So real quick, we're going to work back through that. We'll select our alignment again. Just redo this. Go to C road samp. Okay, we're going to take that one and that one. Existing ground. Finish ground. Okay. Okay, and now we're going to do our range of stations again. So we want to set this from the alignment start to false because now we want to officially enter the original or the beginning of our actual construction. So the beginning of our typical section. Now we're going to change these based on what we looked up. And now, well, reminder, set these to 70. And now we want to turn these on to true. We want to set sample controls at the range start and range end. So it will set one right at the beginning of our project. And then it'll immediately have 10 plus 50. Similarly, we'll have a station at 18 plus pair. And then our last one at 18 plus 27. So now we're going to hit OK. We'll right click, and so you see now we've created one right here and right there. Okay, so now we have them every 50 feet all the way down. Like I mentioned before, you could add another one here at your bridge center line, which is probably always a good idea. But sometimes that comes later, and that might be a separate sample line group that you want separate cross-drain sections, completely different from your roadway sections. Okay, but now we have the sample lines, and if we look, I'm pretty sure they fall under alignments, center line alignments. And so within our hierarchy, our alignment contains all the information for profiles, profile views, as well as sample line groups. Okay, and so you can see this is our group, and now we have created all of these are the sections, so these are the things we have sampled. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to actually create our cross sections that we can put in our design sheets. So we're going to go back up here to section views, and we want to actually create multiple views. If you want to create one view at a time, so each sample line, you can work through this process and you can just create one section view at a time. But if we want to do multiple at a time and we want to plot them so they look nice on a single page, we're going to do create multiple views. So here we have our alignment, and we're going to go through our sample line group. Now again, right now we only have these, but it's good to always verify that these are set to the things you actually want it to be. So our station range, we can leave that because it encompasses all of our samples for there. Section view name, section layer, we don't need to mess with those. We do want to set our view style to road section. And again, we can leave this view layer similar as when we create a profile view. We can leave it to 0 or whatever because we're going to set it off to the side so it's not interfering with anything that we would need to turn on or off. We're going to hit next. And so we have our own set templates. here within our drawing styles. There are multiple AutoCAD base templates that you can use, but this is basically the templates we have created. And so we want to plot this by page. So now we can hit next. So we're going to leave this automatic, the left, and so this is 90 and 90. Again, we set our sample lines to be 70, but it should automatically adjust to what we sampled, but that gives us enough room. We could manually turn it back to 70, but we don't need to. For elevation range, this one can kind of be tricky. If you set it to automatic, it could be all over the place, and sometimes they are anyway. I like to do a user specified, and I want them to be normally give me about 30 foot of range. And I like to just follow the section, and the section is the existing ground. We could also do the corridor top, so any of those, and that's basically kind of setting that to be the middle point of all of these. So now we can just hit next, and so this is how this is all going to be displayed within our section views. So we want it to draw all three of these. Again, this was the top, our corridor top, corridor bottom, or datum, and our existing ground. So we want it to draw all of these, but we don't want it to label all of these necessarily, or any of these actually. We just want it to draw it on there. So we're going to set all our labels to none, but we want to make sure our style, which it should set what we had before. Our existing ground, our top is our finished ground, and our datum is just standard. Okay. Right now we're going to set the bands to none. So bands, basically you can set them at the bottom of your sections to reflect EG and FG surface elevations, but until we're done, and it's easier to just come back later and set all of that. So right now we've clicked everything. We can just create section views, and it just asks us, well, where do you want to put them? So generally just pick somewhere kind of out in space that's not going to interfere with anything else, and hopefully it works. Now, it didn't quite work. So it did plot, and we have them all set up here. But one thing I forgot to do, which is important based on our template, is to change the annotation scale. This should be 1 to 10. So you notice the text is all really large. If I change it now, it sets it up where all of our sections look correct, but it has messed up the whole page. So this should be the page size that it plots in. So that's something I'll need to go back through and reset. So I'm going to back up, and I'll have to redo that. But that essentially is the process for creating. Oh, there we go. All right, for creating all of our section views. So I can work back through that fairly quickly again. So now that, see, it changed back. So now I'm going to reset that to 1 to 10 and make sure that's set. If I'd have looked at my notes, that would have been the first thing I'd looked at. So we want it to be 1 to 10. Again, this is specific to our style, and when we set that drawing template, and I'll show you here in a second. So we'll go back to road section. Here, it's labeled cross section 10 scale, and that's why that messed up, because it was set to the wrong scale. I want to plot by page. That's okay. Follow a section. Draw. Turn all the labels off. Okay. Next, and turn the bands off. Okay. Now we'll come back over here and hopefully, yep. Now we have cross sections. Okay, and you'll note the width, it did knock it down to 220, but I did mess up this time. I forgot to change it to 30 feet. So we'll end it there for this video. I'll get that actually fixed up so you don't have to see it work through again. And then in the next video, I'll show you how we can manipulate our section views, how we can take a look. Because you note, when we chose to follow a section, not very many of these actually showed up. And you'll see it's not really in the center. And a lot of that is because we didn't do the full 30 feet. But again, we'll work through that, and in the next video I'll show you that and how to edit any of these individually. So we're going to end that here for now.